So, a buddy of mine recently got shipped off to the Navy, but before he went, he pulled me aside. He said, "Tristan, by the time I come back, I either want to see a Deadlock lore video or a Limbus Company lore video. And seeing as I know jack shit about Limbus Company, today we will be discussing in depth the most recent of Valve's gaming endeavors, Deadlock. Deadlock is currently an early access, invite-only MOBA/hero shooter mix that's still in alpha, and matter of fact, it probably won't be in beta for minimum another year, likely even longer. Seeing the circumstances, the uninitiated might think that this was some super small, super niche thing, but no. With the release of this latest update, Deadlock has consistently been in Steam's top 10 most played games, with an average of 100,000 users daily. And again, this isn't even the complete vision for the game, and you have to go ask somebody who's already a player for an invite to even start playing the game. Pretty nuts, right? Now, one thing that I really like about Deadlock is that it doesn't really hold your hand at all, which makes for a really cool learning experience as you learn how certain characters or items interact with each other. But when it comes to the surprisingly deep lore of the game, one can be confused where to start. So, seeing as I have close to 800 hours on the game, I figured I'd give it a go explaining the complete lore of Deadlock so far. I've been playing pretty consistently since around October. Here's my rank, here are my mains, I enjoy tanking. So this video serves as my way to turn this obsession of mine into something actually productive. Speaking of productive, sorry it's been a minute since my last upload. College fucking sucks, so I haven't really had a chance to sit down for a video. Sorry about that. With that out of the way though, let's get right into it. So Deadlock's lore can be split into two not very equal parts. The setting, like what's going on in the broader world of Deadlock, and the individual character lore. I'll be getting a bit of the setting part out of the way first, and we can bring up the finer details as it goes on. But if you're really just interested in skipping to the individual character lore, there will be timestamps in the description below. The world of Deadlock exists in an alternate reality where the supernatural and the occult, or virtually anything similar, demons, unicorns, vampires, you name it, has existed for as long as time itself in some capacity. Now, some people attribute the existence of magic in the world of Deadlock to an event that occurred 50 years before the events of the game itself, but in truth, we can be confident that the supernatural has always been around through characters like the Drifter, Doorman, and Warden's lore, to name a few. But as far as the general public is concerned, the existence of such beings and phenomena likely shared the role that fairy tales and ghost stories share in our lives today, where these things were simply just rumors of the supernatural. But that was likely all that it was chalked up to. Of course, there were people who caught on to the supernatural far earlier than the general public, but this was the exception, not the majority. That was until the first Maelstrom, which likely occurred between 1890 and 1899. What exactly a Maelstrom is remains unclear, we only get bits and pieces, but from what the game tells us, the Maelstrom is a celestial event lasting anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours, in which, during an eclipse and subsequent storm-like event in the sky, supernatural phenomena on Earth surged to their peak. And during this first Maelstrom, this surge in energy caused rifts in time and space known as astral gates. Now, it is possible that some of these gates were active before the first Maelstrom, such as the one in the Bermuda Triangle, as that is also where the first mention of the Loch Ness Monster comes from in lore, which was cited nearly a millennia and a half ago in real life. But it's implied that most of the astral gates, of which there are 7, became active during the first Maelstrom. So, seeing as there is a 50-year gap between the first Maelstrom and the events of the game, what exactly happened during that period? Well, elements of the supernatural became incorporated in day-to-day life for many. Computers are powered by occult magic, the shopkeepers use souls as currency, and what's known as the Big Apple in real life is known in Deadlock as the Cursed Apple, on account of New York's normal melting pottedness having the extra element of the supernatural mixed in. As for broader scale things, many events in Deadlock's history alter significantly from ours. Instead of Hawaii and Alaska being colonized and incorporated as states, Puerto Rico, the fictional island of Cadenza, and the outer plane world of South Ixia become the 50th, 51st, and 52nd state, with the United States seemingly colonizing Puerto Rico specifically because it houses an astral gate. Either one or both world wars are implied to have been avoided or directly prevented through the use of divination in this world, and military companies like Fairfax Industries, led by the almost cartoonishly evil Maximilian Fairfax, began creating weapons that utilize soul technology. Elsewhere, various groups have popped up with different responses to the supernatural, such as the Friends of Humanity, who can affectionately be called human supremacists. And naturally, elsewhere, groups popped up to deal with supernatural predators, groups like the Baxter Society or the Swords of St. Benedict, to name a few. Now, to get any further into specific groups or events in Deadlock would require the individual character lore, and believe me, we're almost there. But one last thing we should get into is really the why of it all. Why are the characters in Deadlock fighting, and who are they fighting for? Well, as I'm sure you can pick up on from my phrasing of things, the first Maelstrom was not an unreplicatable event. It merely seems that the events of a Maelstrom occur when a specific set of celestial circumstances line up. And Deadlock itself occurs during the second Maelstrom, presumably occurring around 1949. with another one being expected to happen in an additional 50 years according to Dynamo and Lady Geist. What makes the second Maelstrom unique though, is that it's the first time humanity has been able to contact extraplanar beings known as the Patrons. While there are more than 2 patrons according to game developer Yoshi, there are only 2 that are attempting to be manifested on Earth during the second Maelstrom, the Hidden King and the Archmother. The extent of the patrons' powers are undefined at the moment. They are classified as elder gods, so clearly it is vast, with the lore descriptions of both individual patrons implying that they are responsible for influencing many aspects of life in the Cursed Apple, and thus they have likely been lurking around for far longer than just the Maelstrom. The Hidden King's influence over the world of Deadlock seems to be more subtle and generally freedom-focused or primal in nature when compared to that of the Archmother's. Quote, "The stretching shadow of a skyscraper, a boarded-up apartment in Hell's Kitchen. The Hidden King exists in the cracks of the city, waiting for his followers to usher him into the light." His appearance is just plain fucking awesome, by the way, and his general grungy and anarchic aesthetic seems to support that. Though it's not implicitly stated, the Hidden King's intended effect over the world is one free of order, though we inherently know less about this patron than his foil, the Archmother. The Archmother's influence over New York is much easier to see in plain sight. Her existence seems to be more of an open secret than anything. Glass, steel, and stone, order and power where once there was none. The Archmother has always guided the Founder's hands, and now it is time for them to welcome her home. Her design is very reminiscent to that of the Statue of Liberty, and it seems that is entirely representative of the role with which she's played in the hierarchy present within society in the Cursed Apple. Her lore more directly calls for rule by order, while the Hidden King's chaotic nature must merely be inferred by proxy of his aesthetic, as well as the fact that he's supposed to be the Archmother's foil. Though both of them want power, what they intend to do with said power and how they want to go about their goals seems to be entirely different. There's this great video by YouTube channel Strawman Studios, who, side note, just makes really well put together Deadlock lore videos. I highly recommend checking them out. But anyways, if you're interested in hearing about the aspects of Lovecraftian literature that went into inspiring the creation of the patrons as we know them today, I'd highly recommend checking out this video here. So anyways, the patrons at the bare minimum have very clear aspirations for power, and at the very least have been carefully planning their emergence into the spotlight, with the second Maelstrom seemingly being this event that they planned for and not this spontaneous opportunity that they're taking advantage of. In case it wasn't obvious, they also don't seem very benevolent, as communications with the patrons is strictly prohibited, and for the most part, it's very ambiguous whether they are beings that will hold up their end of the bargains with the people that do their biddings. So why would one want to summon a patron? It seems effectively like you're making a deal with the devil. Well, courtesy of being elder gods, the patrons offer to fulfill one wish of any hero who works to summon them by the means of killing the other patron in a ritual. There are restrictions and limits to what they can accomplish, whether they are limitations of their power or they simply just fall under the category of lol no, is up to interpretation. But the very why of Deadlock is the wishes that the patrons offer. So I think there's no better time than the present to get into the individual character lore and discuss who these people are and why they are partaking in the ritual. And who better to start with than...
Don't worry, I'm on the case.
Arguably the most recognizable character in all of Deadlock, Abrams is a member of the Ixian race, a group of people who resemble demons of literature, and usually have some sort of control or mastery of fire, though Abrams himself is an exception. But rather than Ixia, Abrams resides in New York, primarily working as a detective, sort of like a Bigby Wolf type. This gruff, no-nonsense detective who's willing to beat a little ass to get to the bottom of things. And that seemed to lead about as normal of a life as one could hope. That is, until the tome stumbled upon him. The tome is a rather mysterious object, being the artifact responsible for him being able to siphon life off of other things, as well as having been known to fly off on its own on occasions. In the leaked Lady Geist visual novel, it's also revealed to have contained a page that was used for summoning an ancient being known as Oathkeeper at one point. So it's not unfair to compare its properties with that of something like the Necronomicon, or hell, maybe even something akin to Gravity Falls journals, though that one's admittedly a bit of a stretch. His purpose in the ritual, though, is to destroy the tome, as many dangerous people are after its power. Though he expresses interest in knowing more about the tome, he wants to be free of the burden that it causes both directly and indirectly to him. So, in the ritual, he's working with the patrons with the express intent of destroying it, though he's skeptical if the patrons will actually fulfill this wish. Aside from the tome, he's been known to investigate other characters or events within Deadlock's lore, such as the heists of the Paradox organization, and has worked with other organizations within the lore, such as the Venators of St. Benedict, though it seems that whatever event required them to work together might not have left the two on the best of terms. Many characters have shown an interest in taking the tome off of Abrams' hands or destroying it themselves, but otherwise Abrams remains friendly with a considerable portion of the cast.
My father entrusted me with this blade, and I will honor him.
Apollo is not only the latest Ixian addition to the game, but also just the latest addition to the game in general. The son of an Ixian warlord, any semblance of a normal life that Apollo would have had, even by battle-torn Ixian standards, was seemingly torn away by the rough political climate of northern Ixia. as his father sent him away to New York to study at Blackmore Academy for his own safety. Though it's not stated directly, it can be inferred that Apollo's mother may have been assassinated, as he mentions having been personally affected by political assassinations, constantly bringing up his father but never his mother. That remains speculation though. What isn't speculation is that he's low-key kind of a dick. I say low-key because a lot of his disrespectful lines are retorts to insults that were thrown at him first, but he has still been known to be quite the judgmental individual. Though he is a bit of a shithead, even going so far as to believe that Ixians are superior to humans, Apollo remains a very honorable member of the cast, holding himself far above any mentions of foul play, presumably earning this view of life through a mix of his father's own beliefs and having been raised to be a fencer from the ripe age of 5. He hopes to become an Ixian Olympian one day, which is kinda cool. Though Apollo takes great pride in his nation and his father, and is fighting in the ritual on behalf of Ixia, it's worth noting that while we don't know exactly what his wish is, he claims that it isn't inherently for his father's sake. It does just generally seem like he's fighting in the ritual more to prove himself than anything.
My creator needs my help, and I won't let her down.
Don't let this guy's lore fool you. Just one round of gameplay against a Bebop is more than enough to show you why he's consistently considered one of the most annoying characters in the entire game. Bebop may seem like your standard scrap golem archetype meant to do menial labor and the sorts, but behind this case of steel lies a soft heart. Bebop was made by an elderly lady named Miss Shelley, who created him basically as her son. They live in a scrapyard and work together while listening to jazz music, hence the name. Tragically though, Miss Shelley fell ill with some kind of illness, and it's rather heavily implied that it's terminal. To make ends meet and support her, Bebop fights in the Bear Pit, presumably having earned a reputation for himself, as he has defeated at least one fighter with plenty of notoriety. But seeing as the ritual is the perfect opportunity to put an end to Shelley's illness, Bebop fights on her behalf to cure her, and then retire from fighting. With said Heart of Gold, Bebop makes it a point to seemingly invite as many people as possible into the Shelley household, including but not limited to Victor, since they're both creations, Viscous to see if the cube may help Miss Shelley not feel ill, and Drifter because the poor bastard complained about being hungry and tired. Oh Bebop, you little rascal.
People ask me if I'm angry all the time, and it's like, yeah, I'm pissed. Why aren't you?
Billy is kind of a weird character to explain. His only lore explanation is, quote, Billy is a white-hot ball of rage, furious at the very notion of something. Maybe it's the cops. Maybe it's magic regulations. Maybe it's the service at the Euro place downtown. Not the good one, the other one. Don't ask him how he got the goat head. Billy doesn't really have a whole lot of lore, other than that he intentionally gave himself the goat head involving eldritch magic somehow, that people have been trying to kill him since before he was born, and that this guy fucking hates everything, like with maybe 2 exceptions. Billy is a punk in the way that a pancake is a frisbee. You've got a lot of the essential elements, but there really is just a lack of cohesion and purpose here. Billy just tends to hate on a lot of shit, seemingly just to hate on it or sound different, though he does have the occasional gem. It's also worth noting just how out of place Billy's design seems in the world of Deadlock. Not in a bad way, by the way, it seems very intentional. We have a 70s/80s British punk styled character running around in 1940s New York. Pretty much every Deadlock character is unique in design, but Billy sticks out very intentionally like a sore thumb when compared to his fellow heroes. Now, I hear talk of Billy being a poser, and that's low-key true, but at least generally, it seems that his wish in the ritual is specifically to cause big societal change, as he sees the system as corrupt. I understand that it's easy to see his general complaining and take it as a lack of action, but like, what else is he doing in the ritual? I know what he's doing after the ritual, and it's not good.
Don't think I've seen you since you got pinched.
That's because you never bothered to visit. If I didn't know better, I'd think you stopped caring.
I just assumed you busted out.
You're looking good. New jacket.
You like it?
I like it even better on the ground of a dark alley.
Now watch this drive.
You want to play?
I think you'll find I'm perfectly agreeable as long as you do what I say.
Calico, also referred to as the most dangerous woman in the world, is a former member of the Baxter Society. If you'll recall from earlier, the Baxter Society is a group that hunts down paranormal and occult threats, effectively just monster hunters. It's also worth noting that the 3 Baxter Society members that we have in game today are all missing the same arm, which has been replaced by a prosthetic. If I had a nickel for every time. Anyways, at some point though, Calico decided to leave the Baxter Society in pursuit of becoming an assassin, as it simply paid better. Since then, she has become highly sought after, but her most famous assassination attempt was one that failed, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Calico's motivation in the ritual is rather vague, but it just seems that she generally wants more power and to become the, quote, apex predator. Jumping back to when she left the Baxter Society, it's implied that her exit was at least in part a little dramatic, as a certain Venator compares her to that of Judas for leaving, whether that's more so just him viewing her actual departure from the society as a betrayal, or if she actually did something to hurt the society itself remains to be seen. Most of the cast, though, weirdly enough, looks up to her. But evidently, the United States government is after her, among others, and she herself has more knowledge than most about some of Deadlock's greatest mysteries, such as the Adversary and the Troubadour, which we'll talk about later.
You are about to see something rare and wonderful.
One of Deadlock's newer residents, Celeste is a unicorn hiding in plain sight. She works and lives as a part of the Coney Island sideshow, being essentially its main attraction, though many question whether or not she is a genuine unicorn. In spite of being in hiding, this is a life that she seems pleased with. That is, until one of her sideshow friends sold a piece of his soul to get out of gambling debt. So now she's partaking in the ritual to get his soul back, though she is aware of the risks it may pose to her safety down the line. Celeste, as annoying as she is to face in game, is probably one of the purest souls in all of Deadlock, in case her lore didn't make that clear enough, as she hates any and all violence but deems it necessary to save her friends here. She's friendly with most of the cast, being friends with Infernus and Abrams, the latter of which is implied to know her true identity. There's really not a lot to talk about here, she's pretty straightforward.
I find perception and reality intersect far less than most would think.
The Doorman is perhaps the single most interesting member of Deadlock's cast on a conceptual level. What initially appears as a humble doorman, the Doorman as we know him is actually an eldritch god who, after eons of torturing man in virtually any way you could possibly imagine, took up a position in the service industry out of boredom, disguised as a human, initially with the intent of just studying human behavior for a couple of weeks. That is, until he ended up finding this position more interesting than he anticipated, and as such, the Doorman has remained a loyal employee at the Baroness Hotel since its inception, which was presumably a long time ago. Several members of Deadlock's cast have either stayed at the Baroness, been kicked out of it, or been invited to stay in it in some capacity after the ritual. It used to have the honor of being the most haunted hotel in America, but has since lost this title after some certain events in the town of Macomb. Back to the actual Doorman himself though, he seems to be a creature that wears many hats. Obviously he's pretending to be a human, but on top of that, he describes himself as a fledgling god and a patron?
Don't you fools get it? I am the patron you should worry about angering.
So yeah, it seems that there is actually a third patron walking around in Deadlock, but he's low-key just dicking around here, so it's okay. Similarly to the other patrons, Doorman has a shit ton of insight into the lives of the other cast members, and to some extent knows the future, as respectively he knows Yamato's real name and prophesizes a death in Ivy's family, to name a few. Just complete side note by the way, he has one of the most interesting kits I've ever seen in a video game, ranging from playing Portal 2 mid-game to sending people to a parkour pocket dimension. It's really nuts, it's so cool. The latter ability is pretty revealing of him and his whims though. Generally though, the Doorman is very cordial, plain up polite to people that he respects, such as Paige, who he invites to host a book reading at the Baroness. But in his ult, we get to see him taunting the other heroes in the game in various ways, showing a glimpse at his true nature. His goal in the ritual is simply to see the patrons, as it's been forever since he last got to see them, only wanting to return to the Baroness after the ritual. The patrons themselves acknowledge his presence with great surprise, acting more like they're seeing an old buddy than employing somebody to kill their eternal rival.
My. Well, isn't this a pleasant surprise? The Archmother will be pleased to see you.
They do, however, try to goad him into wishing for his former power, but this seems of little concern, as he does genuinely have a love for serving humanity.
The hunt begins.
In the same vein as the Doorman, the Drifter is perhaps one of our best pieces of insight into the world of Deadlock. Drifter has bare minimum been around since at least 1664, calling New York by the name of New Amsterdam, and man, what a reputation he's been able to earn for himself. Drifter is our first vampire that we'll be covering, but unlike the traditional vampire imagery of a gothic, refined fashion sense, and the general sense of hierarchy that comes along with the whole vampire thing, Drifter disregards all of this in favor of a more nomadic lifestyle, having traveled across the United States for centuries, preying on pretty much anybody that he deems fit to kill. Having been around for so long, he's met just about everybody he could be connected to, and has earned himself the right of being hunted by almost every major group in Deadlock that deals in that sort of matter. It's implied that he knew the real-life historical cowboy Doc Holliday at one point, and has met the Doorman before, along with being longtime friends of Oathkeeper, that powerful spirit we briefly mentioned in Abrams lore. Having a bounty on his head means that he has been hunted by and killed some of the Venators, and has a not-so-friendly rivalry with the Baxter Society, being rather playful with its former leader, Talon. I say friendly, but it's about as friendly as it could be when the two have actively tried to kill each other for for presumably decades. In spite of his hatred for vampire society and traditions, he thinks that Mina, the other vampire of the cast, is, quote, a pathetic excuse for a vampire. And surprisingly enough, of all the people in the cast that he's afraid of, it's Infernus, who he expresses relief with when they're working on the same side. The Drifter has no wish from the patrons. He's merely participating in the ritual for the bloodshed it will provide, stating that the patron's wish is just a bonus.
Looks like I'll have to cancel class this afternoon.
Professor Dynamo was a scientist interested in the occult at the time of the first Maelstrom. When an astral gate opened in Central Park, he just had to check it out. Upon doing so, however, his body was atomized and reduced to that of a dying star. Since then, though, he's seemingly lived as normal of a life as one could hope to, obtaining an artificial body, marrying a woman named Marla, of who he's been married to for over 30 years, and continuing to teach at Columbia University. Dynamo is effectively just Deadlock's universal father figure, being Aaron Fairfax's godfather, teaching Ivy's sister, and just generally having almost everybody look up to him in some fashion. He's in the ritual so that he can give his wife the ultimate anniversary gift in the form of his body. He is a wife's man, by the way, defending her honor from Lash and just generally mentioning her a lot. He's friends with some of the more academic figures in Deadlock too, and generally just wants to know more about some of the artifacts and phenomena that the other characters are involved in.
Great! I'm running around Manhattan with a severed lich hand. How did this become my life?
Graves is pretty much your standard necromancer character. In the standard emo teenager shtick, Graves had a habit of visiting cemeteries to talk with the dead, until one day she discovered the severed hand of a lich, who she has since taken up as her mentor. Though she holds her in high regard, it's implied that the lich may be just using her to get what she herself wants, though Graves does not heed these concerns. Otherwise though, speaking for and helping bring peace to the dead is a role that she seems to take pride in. As such, she does express interest in helping some of Deadlock's undead characters, such as Kelvin, Vindicta, and Victor. And being an edgy teenager, she just holds some not very admirable characters in admiration, such as Yamato or Silver. Side note, by the way, you have no idea how sad I was that her lore does not connect at all to Victor's. I understand functionally why, but like, man. Like Apollo though, she is also a student at Blackmore Academy and is actually his lab partner.
I can't replace what was taken from me, but I can make them answer for it.
Wesley Grey Talon was the founder of the Baxter Society, and seemingly a damn good leader too, as he has quite the reputation surrounding him according to various other characters in the game. However, his duties led to him not being able to spend the time with his family that he might have hoped for. And so, when his son had a family of his own, Talon appointed a new leader of the society and set off for a quiet retirement, making up for lost time with his wife, making good memories with his son and their family, until one day he got a call about a freak accident that claimed the lives of that portion of his family. A fire was responsible according to the police, but he knew better, as his daughter-in-law was an Ixian, one who could snuff out any flame with a mere thought. And so, Talon has come out of retirement to get revenge on whoever did this to his family. The Who here are the Friends of Humanity, that human supremacist group from earlier. It's not confirmed specifically who did it, but given that Talon's whole thing is tracking and hunting, I'd imagine he's probably not wrong for suspecting them. Most characters in the game respect Talon, with Vindicta herself sharing in his revenge quest for reasons we'll go into later. His lore is also one of the few insights we get into the limitations of the patron's powers, as they simply can't bring back his family or refuse to out of some sort of principle. Either way, it's one of the only times that we hear of something the patrons aren't able to do. Instead though, he's settled on good old-fashioned revenge. Calling back to earlier, I stated before that the Drifter and him have some history, but while we don't know exactly what it was, some particularly nasty event happened between the two in Oklahoma, so take that as you will. Also, when asked if he was the one that killed his family, Drifter says he didn't do it because if he was going to, he would make Talon watch. So, what a lovely dude.
You know it's bad when they send a Sandman.
Haze is a member of the United States government's Occult Security and Investigation Commission, as a member of their Sandman division. The OSIC is effectively like the CIA, but instead of meddling with international affairs through things like warfare and fear-mongering, they dabbled in the occult instead. As a part of the Sandman division, Haze is a dreamwalker, tasked with taking out problematic persons of interest in their sleep should they wind up on the United States radar. Haze says she joined the OSIC out of love for her country, and though she does see them as flawed, cause, you know, duh, she is ultimately an ends justify the means kind of person. She has her eye on many of the cast, being ordered to assassinate some of them, but otherwise is rather cordial with the normal people of the cast. She also does have an actual life outside of her job. It's a nice bit of juxtaposition for a character to be simultaneously so job focused, but she's also just like a nice person. I say nice even though she is still ultimately somebody who murders people in their sleep. but she's like an actual person with hobbies, which is cool. She plays the cello for fun and doesn't particularly seem fond of her job in spite of her being fond of her country. As such, the patrons try to tempt her to wish for a new life, but currently, as far as we know, she is fighting in the ritual on behalf of the OSIC.
When I find who I'm looking for, I'm not bringing him in. I'm putting him down.
Holliday is the granddaughter of the famous historical cowboy Doc Holliday and wields his famous revolver, which looks like a slab of plastic in-game currently. This is also how that lore tidbit came up when we were talking about the Drifter earlier. She's the sheriff of the small town of Macomb, Illinois, and it seems that really nothing out of the ordinary happened there, as she was quite content with the slower life it provided. That was until a traveling folk murderer known as the Troubadour began taking up his line of work in her town, leaving grisly crime scenes wherever he went, reminiscent to that of someone having their innards picked apart by birds. Upon tracking him down and confronting him though, he exploded into a murder of crows and vanished. Holliday is in New York on a revenge quest, intending to use the patron's wish to find and kill the Troubadour. But what she herself is in denial of, and everybody around her seemingly sees in plain sight, is that Holliday is on a very destructive path. One that, even if she gets exactly what she wants, will likely be too far gone to actually enjoy it or recover from it. What's worse is that the fucking Drifter of all people tells her to stay away from the Troubadour.
You looking for the Troubadour, right?
That's right. You got a tip for me?
Yeah, you don't want to find him.
I'm getting real tired of people telling me that.
Macomb matters a lot to you, but to him it was just a fun time that'll get lost in the ocean of memory. But if you find him, if he knows he got his hooks in you, you're gonna be his hobby.
What's that mean?
Oh, I wouldn't want to spoil the surprise, but trust me, Sheriff, for your sake, let it go.
You know how evil you've got to be for the Drifter to be wary of you? Holliday also had a sister who passed away, and it's implied that she was a victim of the Troubadour as well. Furthermore, on the personal front, she's been married and divorced several times. I'm seeing a lot of green flags about her mental health.
Sometimes, you gotta go to extremes to help your friends.
Finally, we're at Infernus, a man who likely needs no introduction, as he is one of Deadlock's more popular characters in my opinion. Infernus is a second-generation Ixian immigrant, being mixed, though he retains the fire mastery that is common with the Ixian race. Growing up in New York, though, with such powers led Infernus to leading a rather rough life of crime, murdering and disposing of people in such a manner that the Drifter seems to hold him in high regard. That was until a man named Hank saved his life and took him under his wing. Thus, Infernus became a rather mellowed out bartender at Jezebel's, which is Hank's bar. The bar has come on some hard times though, having been threatened with closure due to code violations. So Infernus is fighting in the ritual to keep Jezebel's open and repay the favor that Hank once gave him. Just about everybody gets along with Infernus, save for a certain young vampire who was once kicked out for using a fake ID. He tends to look out for a good chunk of the cast, but most interestingly in my opinion, he offers to give Grave a place to stay should she find herself in over her head. Perhaps showing that he recognizes the situation that she's in, even if she doesn't yet. Though he is in the ritual for a noble reason, he does worry that he may enjoy getting to cut loose a little too much. Though ultimately, he seems like a good dude.
I'll do anything to keep the people of Spanish Harlem safe.
Ivy is essentially the patron saint of Deadlock, no pun intended. While we have members of the cast who are pure of heart or show good intentions, Ivy has essentially been a protector of the innocent since she came to life 18 years ago. You see, Ivy was a gargoyle, but she came to life just in time to witness a couple of members of the Arroyo family being assaulted by members of the Mendoza crime syndicate. She saved the Arroyos and ended up becoming a part of their family, and spent the next almost 2 decades as a vigilante dismantling the Mendozas to make the area of Spanish Harlem safer for its residents. After that was said and done though, Ivy seeks to find further purpose beyond simple vigilantism. She has several motivations for being in the ritual, obviously to find that purpose she's looking for, but also to make the Arroyos' lives easier, keep Spanish Harlem safe, and to help the father of the family, Carlos Arroyo, secure a spot as New York's next mayor. Ivy has connections to a surprising amount of the cast given how little she strays out of Spanish Harlem. Most notably in my opinion is that her sister is one of Dynamo's students, and furthermore, she pays for her tuition at Columbia by working under Wraith's crime organization, which I'm sure Ivy wouldn't approve of. Virtually everybody in the cast looks up to Ivy in some regard, even the more evil bastards like Drifter and Seven, though she does have beef with the crime lords of the cast. I know there are more iconic and popular characters in Deadlock's cast compared to Ivy, but at least in my opinion, Ivy is one of the closest characters that Deadlock has lore-wise to a main character, which is pretty cool. There's somebody else that I think might take it a little more, but she's up there.
Time for an adventure.
Kelvin is one of the many educated members of Deadlock's cast, who, like the others, shows an interest in the astral gates. And so, when rumors came along of an 8th astral gate hidden in the Arctic, Kelvin quickly secured funding by none other than Lady Geist, interestingly enough, before departing with the crew on an expedition that seemingly had a lot of fanfare, though tragically none of them would return. Around a year and a half after they initially set off, Kelvin's frozen body was brought up by a fishing trawler. As they tried to excavate him though, Kelvin woke up. The man had no pulse and no blood, yet miraculously he was alive, presuming that the glowing rock strapped to his back is responsible for his revenant state. Though he's alive, he has no recollection of what happened during the expedition, and is participating in the ritual to find out exactly that. Kelvin has been wrought with guilt since the expedition, trying to check up on the families of the crew, but one man he failed to reconnect with was a man by the name of Ettrick, a former friend of his who he seemingly pushed away for the sake of his own ambition. It got to a point where, at the fundraising event for the expedition, Ettrick, quote, made a scene before presumably going away, never to be seen again, allegedly. Kelvin claims though that if somebody is to kill him, it will be Ettrick. Keep that in mind for later. In other, less menacing news, Kelvin is a writer. He writes about his expeditions and adventures and presumably earned much of his notoriety from exactly that.
I paid a terrible price for a second chance, and I would gladly pay it again.
The aforementioned Lady Geist is your classic tale about somebody making a deal with the devil for the sake of eternal beauty. Jen Geist, yes, that's how it's pronounced, born in 1815, comes from money, marrying a German artist, one Johann Geist, before having a son with him in 1850. All was well, as she was able to enjoy the luxuries of living it up rich. But as is the case with everybody, Geist eventually began to age, and what once was a lady who was the talk of the town became nothing but, well, an old hag. Her husband passed away, and by the time the first maelstrom came along, she was looking for the answer to her affliction, and she believed she found that in Oathkeeper, an evil spirit with a knack for Faustian bargains. Oathkeeper demanded blood in return for keeping her young, wanting her to kill others to feed it, which Geist agreed to. Against Oathkeeper's interests though, she had her son create a ward to contain it, and all was well for about 50 years. However, after her son died and many a decade had passed, the ward is now failing, with Oathkeeper growing more hungry than ever before, swearing to kill Geist if he gets free. And thus, Geist is participating in the ritual to prevent exactly that. There's a visual novel that actually goes into what Geist might do at the end of the ritual, but it has several branching paths and honestly might not even be canon anymore since they use the old patron models, and it's been a minute since there's been any evidence of work put into it. So if you want to look it up yourself, there's a YouTube walkthrough of it online. Strawman Studios also made a video going into it in depth if you want an explanation. Despite being ghoulishly evil, Geist has been known to make use of her wealth for good, as she owns a homeless foundation and offers to help Infernus with keeping Hank's bar afloat after the ritual is done. Something interesting, by the way, is that had she not fucked over Oathkeeper with the ward, it's implied that she would have been hunted down by the Baxter Society, which is kinda neat. Though in spite of this, she has also ended up on the OSIC's radar. Also, I mentioned briefly earlier that Drifter was friends with Oathkeeper, but on that very topic, he seems sad that he's locked up, as he can't believe that somebody that fun was able to be contained.
Oh, I'll summon the patrons, but just so I can tell them, you're welcome.
Everybody and their dog knows that Lash's only lore line is, quote, Jacob Lash is an asshole. But what exactly makes him an asshole? Well, Lash is a fighter and champion of the Bear Pit, that fight club where Bebop frequents, and as such, the two of them have a beef so absurd and so in-depth that Lash stopped uppercutting people simply because Bebop uses an uppercut.
A fun little fact, the Lash used to do an uppercut, and then I saw Bebop do an uppercut, and I knew right then and there that I would never do one again.
When asked about their beef, both characters simply will say they hate the other character because they are the other character. Though Lash is the champion of the Bear Pit, he has lost to Bebop once, though he has also beat Bebop once, so it seems they're tied. Aside from that though, Lash seems like a very typical heel character, or in layman's terms, somebody who's in the fighting scene whose whole character is just being an asshole to draw attention. You would think that means that he has like a heart of gold outside of it, but no. He's still an asshole outside of the Bear Pit. He flirts with pretty much every female hero, which I don't think I need to spell out for you how that goes. He's also commonly referred to as a stevedore by the other heroes, which traditionally refers to a person who unloads shit from a boat. But in Lash's case, he's more likely an airship worker, given his general focus on air mobility, as well as his old model having Zephyr tattoos, which are spirits that power Deadlock's airships in lore. Whether or not this piece of Lash's character remains canon though, remains to be seen in the final release, since his tattoos have been removed, but the voice lines haven't. Lash's wish in the ritual is unknown, but he states he knows exactly what he's asking for, and expects gratitude from the patrons for summoning them.
Do I love working for Fairfax Industries? No. Does it pay a small fortune? Yes. How do I sleep at night? Like a baby.
Mcginnis is your standard Lockheed Martin employee if Lockheed Martin was actively weaponizing souls for the sake of conquest. She's been inventing since she was a kid, but caught the attention of Fairfax Industries at the age of 15, when she invented a machine that refined souls. She was known to have been paraded around ever since Maximilian Fairfax, the CEO of the company, first found her, and has since climbed the ranks to become the head of the company's military research and development department. In lore, she's indirectly responsible for causing the deaths of millions of people across several countries and realms. But she doesn't lose any sleep in spite of this, since it pays well. Despite her inherent evilness, Mcginnis does tend to offer to upgrade many of the cast members in some aspects, even aligning with Lady Geist in her visual novel. She also catches the attention of many of the more morally dubious characters of the cast, most interestingly of which, in my opinion, is the Doorman, who calls her the most brilliant mind humanity has to offer.
So that's the brightest mind humanity has to offer.
So that's interesting. Her goal in the ritual is unknown, but the most that we get told is that she's testing her weapons and is presumably there on behalf of Fairfax Industries, unless stated otherwise down the line.
There's either do this or go to a lame vampire salon, and let me tell you, I do not plan on putting up with 6 hours of harpsichord music.
Mina is, well, a spoiled brat. She comes from a rich family and was promised a life of luxury beyond one's wildest dreams, to the point where her parents arranged a marriage for her with Maximilian Fairfax's kid, Aaron, in order to move her up from measly upper class to full-on American royalty. And then their spouse got assassinated. Mina was very understandably upset about this, but not for the loss of love or a life, but rather that their spouse died before she could obtain the status that she wanted from the Fairfax name. Her parents knew that she wouldn't be satisfied with compromise, and so they had to upgrade her from mere royalty to straight up immortality, with the added bonus of a trust fund. They found a vampire willing to turn her, and she gladly said yes. Yet, now that she's a vampire, the other vampires low-key hate her. Even the Drifter, who otherwise has no care for vampire traditions and society in general, thinks she's lame. And so now she is partaking in the ritual to become the Viscount of New York, essentially just at the top of vampire hierarchy for New York. Outside of the whole vampire thing, she owns a clothing brand and runs fashion shows. She also idolizes Lady Geist, being the only other left-handed character in the game, funnily enough, and is also very understandably afraid of the Drifter, which, like, who isn't? Though she is a very entitled lady who was primarily excited about the prospect of marriage because of her status though, it's implied that she might have actually had some sort of feelings for Aaron, according to the patrons.
Once you complete the ritual, Aaron will realize their folly, and the other vampires, your worth.
But we'll get back to that when we talk about another hero. Mirage is a bodyguard for a lady named Nishala, who is a member of and ambassador for the Jinn, a powerful group of spirits who are unable to maintain a corporeal form for more than 48 minutes without resting in a vessel. You see, the Jinn often employ bodyguards like Mirage for the sake of getting around safely, but this has led to the general need for a home place, with Nishala hoping to settle down with their people in Wyoming.
So, Wyoming.
I know.
Good luck with that.
To do so, she seeks to purchase a piece of it from the US government. But just in case, Mirage is here fighting with her on her behalf to help secure the rights to buying Wyoming with the help of the patron's wish. Mirage has worked for Nishala for several years at this point, and is very committed to her cause, being willing to die and kill to achieve it. He carries her with him as he deems himself the safest place for her to be. Should any members of the cast threaten to hurt Nishala or steal from her, Mirage would straight up slime them out, which is fair. The two of them are staying at the Baroness during their free time in New York, and Mirage enjoys bowling in his free time.
He does the digging, I do the talking. We tried it the other way, but it didn't work.
Jeffrey, Epps, Mo, and Krill, despite being absolute bastards to play against in-game, are perhaps some of the more well-intentioned members of Deadlock's criminal cast. They are members of the Tunnel Rats, a group of peddlers that live under New York. And it seems for the most part that the group as a whole is respected by the common folk of the Cursed Apple, though occasionally a gang or mafia will abuse the services they offer, and at that point they have to knock some skulls together. Maurice, the Mole Man, who is also called Momo by Krill, Pocket, and Haze, has been friends with Krill for ages. Though we don't know the exact circumstances of the beginning of their friendship, Krill describes it as one that was formed out of, quote, respect and certain death. The two of them are quite the artistic souls, with Krill currently authoring a book about their adventures, while Mo has an interest in auditing a pottery class at Columbia University after the ritual. Though we don't get to hear Mo speak in-game, Krill says that he does to those he wants to. Under the Sewer Rats, they've sold trinkets from Kelvin's expedition to Ixia, knockoffs of Mina's dresses, and most charmingly in my opinion, they offer to help Dynamo get his hands on a first edition Don Quixote for his wife. willing to work around the fact that he is on a teacher's salary. They do work with some of the more evil members of the cast though, obviously, being good friends with Wraith and offering to help Seven stay in hiding for a price. Don't worry about that yet, we'll get there. As for themselves though, they are partaking in the ritual either on behalf of Wraith, depending on if she's on the same team as them, or for the sake of earning the glory and respect that they believe they're owed, which honestly, good on you guys.
This is gonna make for one hell of a story.
Paige comes from a family where books and storytelling in general are very important, as one of her parents is a rare book dealer. And though the household taught the importance of kindness and all that, her younger brother, Bryce, in standard rebellious teenager antics, did not appreciate such lessons. Though she doesn't know exactly what the inciting incident was, eventually Bryce got kicked out of the house, leaving her family in shambles. And as the years went by, she became an expert bibliomancer, earning a living as a storyteller. But even during all that time, there hasn't been a peep about Bryce. Not even from her parents. And so now, Paige is partaking in the ritual to learn what happened to him. Bryce evidently isn't dead, as he's known by a couple of the other heroes, namely Venator, who believes he doesn't deserve to be saved, and Vyper, who says that he's a more fun person than Paige. Either way, not good signs. There's fan speculation that Billy is Bryce, given that he's a generally rebellious dude interested in magic, something which Bryce wasn't allowed to use in the Paige household, and also because he knows Vyper. But I'm not entirely sure that I buy it on account of them not really interacting like they're familiar with each other. It also just doesn't line up with the little bit of lore that we do have about Billy. It is a cool theory though. Paige's storytelling abilities have gotten her some notoriety though, as the Doorman invites her to read at the Baroness, Ivy's brother has brought her into one of her sessions, and none other than Jacob Lash of all people respects her for going to college and being educated. She also has a crush on like half of the male cast, and very notably in my opinion, has some of the longest goddamned voice lines in the game.
Hey, let's see. Got my King Arthur, got my Midsummer Night's Dream, got my Wuthering Heights. I mean, that one's probably less useful, but you never know when you'll need a Byronic hero for something romantic yet dangerous.
I gave up my name to join Paradox, and it's a choice I would gladly make again.
Paradox is not only the name of our next hero, but also the name of the Thieves Guild that she comes from. Paradox as an organization is like Robin Hood if Robin Hood was a company that simply decided to steal shit to prove that they could steal shit. The group consists of several members who have given up their identities, adopting the moniker of Paradox, who set out to pull off elaborate heists and schemes, putting up their spoils for display at pop-up Paradox museums, simply to show off the idea that nobody's out of reach. The Paradox that we meet in game was a rich lady of Scottish descent. Hey, editor me here. Correction, every member of Paradox is rich. It's not just the one we have in game. Sorry. Who simply just got bored and decided to join the organization one day. She's called the Time Thief in game, but it's unclear what exactly their time manipulation is capable of or how it works. It's very important to note that it's not time travel, just time manipulation. Some important people or groups that they're planning on stealing from or have already stolen from include the Baxter Society, the Baroness, the Vatican, Kelvin, Lady Geist, Paige, Abrams' Tome, Celeste's Horn, Holliday's Revolver. You get the gist at this point. Though the patron implies that she's after nothing specific in the ritual, it's implied at least a little that she's partaking in it either to steal something from the other patron, such as the Hidden King's crown, or to prove that she's fit to lead the Paradox organization.
My father's gift for my 18th birthday was a bullet to the chest. Today's my chance to say thank you.
Aaron Pocket Fairfax is perhaps the single most interesting character in Deadlock lore-wise in my opinion. Perhaps because of how central they are to just about everything in the world of Deadlock. I know I previously mentioned Ivy being a good contender for main character of the game, but honestly the title might make more sense in Pocket's hands. Though Pocket was to be the heir to Fairfax Industries and its fortune, on their 18th birthday, their father gifted them a bullet to the chest, straight from none other than Calico. Though they were presumed dead, they actually went into hiding, seeking asylum in the tunnels with Mo and Krill, who became their found family. At some point, Pocket came into possession of a magical briefcase, one which holds immense power, though Pocket wishes not to reveal what it is, and instead seeks to keep their father from using it as a weapon. Now, in the ritual, Aaron hopes to stop their father, not kill him, and take control of Fairfax Industries. Pocket is another member of Deadlock's cast that hates violence, only resorting to it if there are no other options, as they don't like the person they think it would make them. They do want to make the world a better place though, and it's implied that they want to do so through Fairfax Industries, wanting to do away with their warmongering ways. As stated before, they were to be married to Mina, who claims they ruined her life by dying, but Pocket also gets recognized by a surprising amount of the cast in spite of their new identity, though funnily enough, Lady Geist mistakenly believes that they are a homeless person who stole their designer jacket. It's also unclear yet if Pocket had any sort of affinity for Mina, simply because Mina came out after Pocket's voice lines were already in the game. We might see some elaboration on it down the line though. Though one could assume that it's just their father to blame for the assassination, the Doorman's ult interaction with Pocket seems to imply that both of their parents are rotten people, maybe even the whole family. Also, Pocket is the only character in the game that outright goes by they them, which is pretty cool. If you're not actively looking into it, it's pretty easy to miss. It's also not a new thing, like they didn't start doing it because they went into hiding, it just seems to have always been the case for them.
I summon Patron, then I go home.
I was gonna make another joke comparing Rem to some deplorable person, but Mo is much more worthy of that gameplay wise. The first of this most recent batch of heroes, Rem is a character who doesn't have a whole lot of background. The other heroes call him a familiar, though his exact species is unknown. But Rem was a resident of the dream world until rather recently, and seemingly is just a creature who aids people in sleeping and can view other people's dreams. That first part though, about living in the dream world, was only true until recently, when at some point he was dragged out of the dream world into the real world, and now he's in the ritual to get back home where he's supposed to be. What is interesting about his lore though is how he interacts with our resident dreamwalker, Haze. You see, Rem and Haze have met on a couple of occasions before and are seemingly friends, perhaps more as Rem calls her his mom, though she denies this. He also calls her himself.
She's me!
Which is interesting. But anyways, it's implied that the incident that forced Rem out of the dream world was one involving one of Haze's missions, and if they're on the same team, Haze offers to help him get home. This seems sweet and all, but remember, the OSIC is not exactly a virtuous group, which is further enforced by a dialogue he has with Seven, where he states that the OSIC is not to be trusted, as they will not help get Rem home. Just food for thought though. I quite enjoy how the other characters interact with Rem, particularly those who are more morally gray, as it's funny to see these big burly evil people gravitate to him nonetheless. Rem is also, weirdly enough, how we get to know how a lot of the heroes smell, I guess.
I freed myself from the shackles of the past, and my future looks bright.
Ah, speaking of, we finally have the man of the hour. Seven has one of the most famous backstories of the entire cast, being in contention for one of the game's most evil characters. You see, Seven is presumably one of the world's most infamous criminals who deal in magic, as he managed to land himself on the radar of the United States before winding up in Lost Whisper, basically uber evil Alcatraz. While we don't know exactly what he did to land there, Seven sure as shit must have earned it, because the government basically pulled out all of the stops in preparation for his execution. Not only was he to be executed, he was to be executed as hard as a man physically could. So hard in fact that neither he nor his soul could ever be conjured up by any admirers down the line. Yet, when the time came, he simply didn't die. Or well, did die according to the Doorman, but he basically just walked it off, I guess. Seven's body, writhing with eldritch electricity, slaughtered the world's most powerful ritualists in an instant, before freeing himself and setting sights on the ritual, where Seven hopes to attain apotheosis, or simply godhood, perhaps the single most ambitious wish for the ritual that there is. As for who he was before he became Seven, it's rather heavily implied that Seven is Kelvin's friend Ettrick, due to the fact that Seven has a one-sided hatred for Kelvin, he's interested in Kelvin's field of study, the Astral Gates, and because he has a line mirroring what Kelvin said about Ettrick, among others.
Don't worry, Kelvin, I won't let you die.
I thought you hated me.
I do, but if anyone is going to kill you, it's going to be me.
Furthermore, when being healed by Kelvin, he says it reminds him of old times. Seven also had a lover at one point. I know that sounds related to the Kelvin thing, it's not. But his lover seemingly drove him to having the mindset that he does today, as according to the Archmother, his lover tried to steal his destiny, with another line between him and Dynamo supporting this.
I don't understand you, Professor. You've been bestowed a great gift, and you're willing to throw it all away for nothing.
Easy words to say when you've never loved someone.
No, easy words to say when you have.
Despite how evil he is, Seven is a rather respectful individual. He's not really outright mean to anyone outside of Kelvin, but he does dislike it when he sees talent going to waste, as he'll often judge other characters for not using their powers to their fullest potential. He does respect people with initiative though, looking up to Dynamo's research on the Astral Gates and respecting Ivy for using her life to make change where she saw it necessary. Overall, just an awesome character. I can't wait to see what they have in store for him.
There's a lot of scary things out there, kid. I'm just scarier.
For being in the game for so long, we don't really have much about Shiv. Shiv is Grey Talon's replacement as the head of the Baxter Society, having been handpicked by the old bastard. Much to the dismay of the other members of the society though, as Shiv seemingly has an extensive criminal past, at least enough to have the Drifter's respect in the same way he has for Infernus. He does know the Drifter, by the way, they've interacted before, and if Drifter kills Shiv in game, he describes it as poetic, whatever that means. Shiv has turned away from his past though and is seemingly on a redemption path, though much of the cast is skeptical. While we don't know what his wish is, Shiv is seemingly participating in the ritual to prove himself to the Baxter Society and Grey Talon. Most of the heroes are split on him though. Half of them respect him, or his hair. The other half seem to think he's this force of nature that's caused enough destruction to not be worth redeeming, and a decent chunk of the cast wanna fuck him. There also used to be this line of dialogue from the patrons that said he was a father, but this line is no longer in the game. There also used to be this lore tidbit where Shiv was seemingly supposed to have this beast living inside of him, to the point where said beast had an unfinished model. But this aspect of the character has been swapped out with his rage mechanic, and instead has been given to our next character.
The crazies are gonna be out in full force tonight, let me tell you.
God, playing silver in-game is like crack when the enemy team actually lets you live the power fantasy and isn't actively looking to make you a victim. Lore-wise though, she's nothing crazy. Lila Silver has been a werewolf for as long as she can remember and is broke as shit. She's not really good at anything. Saying she has a dependence on alcohol is an understatement, and saying she enjoys her life is an outright lie. To make ends meet, she has taken up a profession as a bounty hunter, which she doesn't even particularly excel in because of skill, but rather because of, you know, the whole werewolf thing. She's partaking in the ritual pretty much just to get her life together so that she doesn't have to be living paycheck to paycheck. Though she says she can control her transformation, it seems that this isn't the case, since her wolf form is one of the only 2 ultimates in the game that isn't voluntary. As a bounty hunter, she's after pretty much every character in lore that could be hunted. So, Calico, Drifter, the Troubadour, you name it. She also has a hatred for Shiv, though we don't really know why. Maybe it'll be elaborated on down the line. It is worth noting though that she's buddies with Infernus, who comes from a similar criminal past to Shiv, but she only thinks one of the 2 is irredeemable. So maybe Shiv's path of carnage affected her personally at some point. Or maybe she's just a hypocrite, who knows. She's buddies with Mo and Krill, who even by sewer rat standards think her life sucks, and is drinking buddies with Venator and Celeste, and weirdly enough is implied to have dated Abrams in the past in an unfinished conversation. Yeah, very fun character to play as, but nothing too deep lore-wise. Also, let it be known that I thought she was a cool character in concept before she got revealed. Like, the idea of a big-ass shape-shifting werewolf running around was sick as fuck. Like, when they leaked all the characters and everybody else had a model or some more concrete explanation of who they were, and she was this elusive werewolf who we knew nothing about, I thought that was sick as fuck. Her design is also really cool, but you know, she's a woman and a wolf in a video game, and certain people will make it weird.
I can't wait to be done with you.
Yeah, the feeling's mutual, buddy.
The Sinclairs are comically unfinished characters even by alpha Deadlock standards. Unlike the other characters, they have no conversations with anybody else, and the model for the spectral assistant is literally just Lady Geist. But from what we can pick up on, the Sinclairs want a divorce. Henry the Magnificent and Savannah the Spectacular were both magicians who got married young, and were so in love that they decided to have their souls bound for eternity. Sinclair is implied to be the pair's last names after they got married. Everything seemed good for them until, during a stage accident, they died. We don't know which one was responsible for it, both blame the other, but now as a pair of ghosts stuck in one body, they wish to be separated. That's literally it. There's no further lore on them, they just want a divorce. It is kinda cool how in-game, when you die as one of the Sinclairs, your voice lines as them will swap to the other ghost. So you're alternating between playing as Henry and Savannah, but their model doesn't really reflect this right now, so it's just kinda funny looking. Something interesting we do get out of them though is that we get a little more insight into Seven's love life, since he says he prefers whatever fate he had with his previous lover as opposed to being stuck in the same body like the Sinclairs, so that's something.
I don't get to walk the righteous path. I blaze the trail so that others may do so safely.
Father Quinn Rourke is a member of the elusive Venators of St. Benedict, a group of elite hunters sent by the Vatican to areas with high concentrations of supernatural predators. They are known for being thorough and precise in their methods, but even with this in mind, Rourke has a reputation for being particularly ruthless in his methods, with most thinking of him as straight up deranged. There are currently less than 24 active Venators, though members of the group have been killed in past, with Drifter claiming responsibility for a number of those kills. Rourke is implied to be the 48th Venator, and he is quite the interesting fellow to behold. He has this dichotomy of believing he's so righteous that he may live a life bordering on villainy so long as his actions give others the chance to live well-intentioned lives. Let it be known though, Rourke has done some actual evil shit. In an unfinished conversation with Calico, he describes how he's able to live with the fact that he's killed numerous innocent people so long as he's aware that it's his burden to carry. He's also just straight up judgy. I know, a devout religious person having preconceived notions. Who would have guessed? He states that he's actively waiting for Shiv to stray from his path of redemption so that he may kill him, and kinda sorta uses microaggressions against Apollo, stating that he doesn't care if he looks like a monster so long as he doesn't act like one. I know one is a lot more severe than the other, but for a man who's dedicated his entire life to God and his word, he's willing to do a lot of stuff that isn't exactly in line with what God would probably want from him. Speaking of God though, his weapon has quite the interesting name. Dubbed 5120, his weapon refers to the Bible passage Jeremiah 51:20. Thou art my battle axe and weapons for war. For with thee I will break in pieces the nations, and with thee I will destroy kingdoms. It's pretty fucking cool, I'm not even gonna lie. He's also the only character in the game, correct me if I'm wrong, whose defenses scale with his spirit, which is pretty cool. But anyways, back to the actual character. In spite of being this dude who's monstrous and hypocritical, he does have moments of being down to earth, and they're honestly super cool to hear. He consoles Holliday about the murders in Macomb, prays for Bebop's mom, and tries to advise Infernus when he's worried about giving in to his past behaviors, which is interesting when considering his earlier interactions with the Drifter.
You got a gleam in your eye, Infernus. How long has it been since you really cut loose?
Long time.
You gonna enjoy yourself today.
You're haunted.
Ain't you heard? The whole city's haunted.
You know what I mean.
I really thought I buried this part of me, you know?
A lot of people try to bury the past. Problem with that is whenever someone comes to go dig it up, they make a big mess.
Got any advice?
Yeah. Win. Otherwise, you're torturing yourself for second place, and that's not worth it.
The Drifter wants him to cut loose to see what he's capable of, while Venator wants him to cut loose without worries so that they may succeed. Don't let that convince you he's free of sin himself though. He still is certainly not a very good man by any stretch of the imagination. It's also worth noting that before his name was Quinn, his in-development name was Cain. You know, like that guy from the Bible who never did anything wrong. Hell, the Doorman still calls him Cain along with some other characters, though it's unclear if that's leftovers from development or meant to be an actual jab at him. A very cool character nonetheless though. His role in the ritual though, on behalf of the Vatican, is to kill the patrons, working with one for the time being to kill the other one after it's summoned.
Who the hell stitches together dead bodies? At least I hope they were dead bodies. Oh God, what if they weren't dead bodies?
Victor is a twist on the classic Frankenstein's monster archetype. Victor awoke one day on a mortuary table with no recollection of who he is, as well as no knowledge of who he's made of or who his creator is. Now, in the ritual, he's looking for answers about his origin. There really isn't too much lore for Victor. He's kind of just been wandering around looking for answers about who he is since he awoke, but hasn't really gotten any closer to having answers outside of the ritual itself. He does describe once having taken a bus to go check out a man who was missing a leg, but he was actually just missing a leg for unrelated reasons. He does ask around for any intel that the more educated characters in the game might have, but the answer is always a no. He does have some sense of camaraderie with the other undead/creation characters like Bebop and Kelvin, but otherwise he kind of just goes along with requests from the other characters since he has nothing to do otherwise. Takes up Mina's offer of modeling for her show in return for being stitched up properly, and he presumably wants to take up Geist's offer of seeing her grandson for help with maintaining his body. Other than that, he wants to get a hot dog when he's done with the ritual, so that's quaint.
Haythorn's disciples will answer for their crimes.
Vindicta, no last name given, was a victim of the Salem witch trials under the actual historical figure Judge John Haythorn, and that was seemingly the end of her story until the first Maelstrom, when she was brought back as a ghost. Ordinarily, being 200 years past your initial death date and almost just as long past the death of the one who sentenced you would leave one's revenge quest unfulfilled. This, however, was not the case for Vindicta, as Haythorn's descendant, also named John Haythorn, leads the new Inquisition known as the Friends of Humanity, that human supremacist group from earlier, effectively putting as clear of a mark on his head as he possibly could. Vindicta has responded appropriately and has set her goals on wiping out not only Haythorn's entire bloodline, but also the entirety of the Friends of Humanity as well, which she seems to have been doing successfully even before the ritual, as she brags about killing Haythorn's brother while he was on a speedboat, which is pretty cool. She does intend to complete her quest though through the patron's wish. As stated before, her and Talon both have camaraderie with each other, as both have hunted down the Friends of Humanity together in the past. She also looks up to him like a father figure, believing that if someone like him was her dad, then she wouldn't have been executed. Though her quest against the Friends of Humanity generally garners good attention from the other cast members, cause duh, Haze wants her to quit while she's ahead, as her succeeding might actually just make shit worse. Vindicta is also actually her legal name, by the way.
I'm squishy.
Viscous is goo. More specifically, he is a sea anemone who is in New York with the help of an ectoplasmic goo body with the express purpose of summoning the patrons to save the deep. Save it from what, you may ask? Well, though the beings that emerge from the Astral Gate in the Bermuda Triangle tend to just be benign, recently a creature known only as the Adversary has crossed through and made its presence well known. What exactly the Adversary is remains unclear for the moment, but Viscous claims that it's a being of immense power with an insatiable lust for genocide. Viscous even claims that once it's done with the deep, it may very well come for everything else. Thus, Viscous is enlisting the help of the patrons to stop it. While he's in New York though, the other heroes call him a tourist, and for good reason, as he wants to visit many areas in the Cursed Apple. He wants to see the play, South Pacific, and free his anemone brothers from aquariums. He also worships the cube, a literal protoplasmic cube that cures seemingly everything, from Victor's chronic pain, to healing inorganics like Bebop, to maybe even being useful as a therapist, since he offers it to Grey Talon. I've also just gotta say while we're here that Rem's whole cute little guy shtick feels like a mockery of what Viscous does naturally, and I will not elaborate any further.
It insists upon itself.
What does that even mean?
You want to know the best bars to get kicked out of? I am your girl.
Vyper is honestly low-key in competition for the funniest character in all of Deadlock. Ironically enough tied with Lash in my opinion, but we'll get to that in a second. Vyper's entire character can be summed up in one sentence. She's really bad at crime and always gets caught for the shenanigans she's up to, but is really good at breaking out of prison. Like, she goes out of her way to talk about this in a good chunk of her lines. Her goal in the ritual isn't really clear, but it seems that she wants to secure a better life for herself. Vyper though has an obsession with everybody's favorite bear pit champion, the Lash. Having rode to him obsessively, stalking him while he sleeps, and as we tragically mentioned before, is so down bad to the point that she'd sleep with Billy just to get to call him Lash during the act. Romance truly isn't dead. She does tend to get around, not in the slang manner, as she is both friends with Paige's brother and knows that Ivy's sister is working for Wraith. She's also been locked up virtually everywhere, as stated before, but to such an extent and with such frequency that Vyper started carrying bolas simply because Silver kept catching her with them. There's really not a whole lot to discuss here though, so here's a funny line or something.
I know a guy who owed the 7th moon a C note. I knew a guy who owed the 7th moon a C note. Yamato murdered the shit out of him.
The patrons must be stopped, no matter the cost.
Warden comes from a long family of alchemists prepared to save the world from a supernatural apocalypse. But when the first maelstrom rolled around, with each consecutive generation of Warden's family slipping in discipline, Warden's parents realized they were ill-equipped to deal with such a large-scale phenomenon. As such, they raised Warden to be the perfect killing machine, with the express intent of stopping the patrons from ever entering this world. Warden, like Venator, is here to kill the patrons, but unlike Venator's more generally morally gray compass, Warden just seems to be like an alright dude committed to the cause. In fact, he's so committed to the cause that he only really seems to train, leaving him with no free time. And consequently, he's been robbed of having an actual childhood. Rem's dream dialogue with him implies that he may long for some kind of further connection with other people, specifically his father figure.
Let's play catch, Warden.
Also, in spite of his Chad Thundercock-esque design, Warden is respectful to people of all races, which might not be the case with Venator. Something interesting to note with Warden though is that all of the elder gods that we see in Deadlock, both the patrons and the Doorman, can't read his intentions, which is interesting, as he is seemingly the only case of this. The Archmother seems to know that he hates her, but that's really the extent of her insight. Warden's also in for the sickest glow up whenever he gets his redesign. There's a couple of characters that really need it, and Warden looks fine for now, but he's supposed to have a cape, which just like, holy awesome.
If you think crime doesn't pay, you are outrageously bad at crime.
Finally, after all these mentions, we have Wraith, who is effectively just the gambling mafia crime boss of the Cursed Apple. As such, she's been up to pretty much the usual criminal activities one would expect from her type. Several characters are in debt to her, such as the Shopkeep, Mo and Krill, and Vyper, though Vyper isn't allowed to borrow money from her anymore since she simply doesn't pay it back. She also hosts weekly poker games with several of the cast, namely Abrams, Silver, Infernus, Mo and Krill, and the Shopkeep, as well as herself. Her gambling ring is on the OSIC's radar, though Haze claims they don't intend to stop her yet. There's not really a whole lot to discuss here. She seems to be partaking in the ritual just generally for more money and power, as well as to grow her organization. But now it does make sense in hindsight why Ivy's sister being employed to her is a bad thing. And finally, we are at our last cast member, Yamato, the alien-looking fuck who is so overdue for a remodel that I can't believe it isn't here yet. Also, her name isn't really Yamato. Kaori and her brother Yamato, we'll get to it, were heirs meant to lead the 7th moon after their father died, essentially just the Yakuza but with magic. To expand the 7th moon, her brother was to leave for America, while she would lead in Japan, but this didn't fly well with some members, and thus, soon after taking over, they were swiftly overthrown in a coup. During this, Yamato gave his life to ensure that Kaori could make it to America with some loyalist members of the 7th moon. When she arrived in America though, their contact mistakenly called her Yamato, and though she thought to correct him for a moment, she instead decided to take his name to honor him, vowing to grow the 7th moon into what he would have wanted it to be. So yeah, we have another crime boss, but instead of the Al Capone type we see in Wraith, Yamato is just straight up a mean fucking lady. Leading by example, having been described as personally killing somebody over a Benjamin, which like, damn, I didn't know the 7th moon was so strapped for cash. Unlike Wraith's simple goals of expansion and general wealth, Yamato wants to rule New York, with smaller side goals like making the OSIC and Nishala bend to her whims. Pretty crazy. Crazy enough that it warranted taking away the only use of the word fuck in the game from Holliday and instead giving it to Infernus to show his disgust with her wanting to run things. Which is like double crazy when you remember that he was friends with Wraith. So yeah, this has been the complete lore of Deadlock so far. No, I'm not covering the Hero Labs characters, fuck you, they're not in the game yet. But thank you all very much for watching and indulging my yap fest about a game I've put way too much time into. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and join our Discord in the link in the description below. Otherwise, I'll see you all soon enough. Bye bye!